Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I thought while I was here filming other things, I would also film a couple videos that I wanted to make. I'm kind of refiguring out how to do this with my body's new normal, and that's something that I've really struggled with the past 2 years, so welcome to the experiment. Theoretically, I will be able to figure something out. I haven't figured it out yet. So I thought I would go over my favorite books so far this year and just some ones I wanted to highlight. I think that's basically the summary of what this video is going to be. And so all except the last one are kind of in no particular order. Okay, so first up is a book in translation. This is by Thorvald Steen, and this is called The White Bathing Hut, and it's translated by James Anderson. And I really loved this book because the author himself is disabled and the story is very much autobiographical. So this book is about a young man who discovers he has a disease that will cause his muscles to degenerate, and he figures this out around 15 years old. And he's trying to navigate Norway's healthcare system, which has a healthy dose of eugenics, and he is just trying to make a life for himself. There's something really beautiful about this book because, during the pandemic, so many doctors were deciding who got life-saving healthcare depending on what their quality of life would be. And obviously it's very disturbing. And one of the things about this book is the depression that the main character feels when he's diagnosed. And ultimately he comes to the conclusion that there is a beautiful life worth living. And that's what this book is all about. And to me, that's really incredibly important. And it was very helpful as I struggled with my own mental health in regards to my illness, disease, whatever you want to call it, my disability. And so I really found this book very emotional and very moving, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since, which is why I bought a copy after listening to a friend read it to me. I love it. Next one up is True Biz by Sara Nović, and this is a novel about 3 different characters who are part of the deaf community, and it's actually set in the Ohio River Valley, where I'm from, which I did not expect. I mean, this is a Reese's Book Club pick. It's been everywhere, but this is a story about a deaf school. So you have Austin is from a traditionally deaf family, a historically deaf family. His dad is hearing and is a sign language interpreter, an ASL interpreter. And he's at the school, and he kind of is very idealistic because that's been his life. You have February, who is a CODA, a child of deaf adults, and so she is actually head of the deaf school where Austin attends. Charlie shows up at the school, and she is a teenage girl who has a cochlear implant that is failing, and so her parents never let her learn ASL. So public school wasn't working very well for her because she wasn't receiving the accommodations that she needed. So when her parents get divorced, her dad convinces her mom to let Charlie go to a deaf school where she starts learning sign language for the first time as a teenager. There's a lot of complicated dynamics in deaf culture that I think this book illustrates. And on the audio, which is what I listened to, the author actually signs all of the text that's in italic, which is supposed to be a translation of the sign, right? So the author uses images a lot and this italics to illustrate that this, conversation is happening in sign. So on the audio, the author is signing, and you can hear the signing in the background. So you always know which dialogue is in sign. And I thought that was very clever on how to translate a translation of something into a medium that it's not literally meant for. And I was wondering how they would do that on audio, since I can't read text and I don't understand sign language. I don't speak ASL at all. And so I really appreciated the thought that went into that. I really appreciated this book and really loved the story and how complex it was. I know, I found it very captivating. The next book is a book that I feel like just hit the right spot, and that's Louise Erdrich's The Sentence. In some ways, this book is kind of all over the place because it has so many different moving parts, almost like the image on the cover. And so I don't think entirely it works structurally, but it was the book I needed at the right time. So this book is about Tuki, who's an Indigenous woman who was incarcerated for moving a dead body for a woman she loves. And that didn't go well, and she ends up in prison. And when she gets out of prison, this guy she's kind of loved always, and she get married, and it's really great. And she gets this job selling books at Louise Erdrich's bookstore, Birchbark Books. So Louise Erdrich is also a character in her own novel, which is fun and strange but delightful all at the same time. And it goes through the pandemic. On top of that, there's this white lady who's kind of obsessed with Indigenous culture, has kind of fetishized Indigenous culture, and she passes away, but like her ghost will not leave the bookstore, and it's a whole thing. So there's a lot of different moving parts, but I just found it a very comforting read, even if again the structure wasn't entirely like together. It was still an enjoyable book to read. So that's why, because it's like the warm and cozy feelings, but also has some hard-hitting moments, like that's kind of why the book really worked for me. And Louise Erdrich reads the book as well. She has a wonderful reading voice. I love it. Another book that was kind of structurally all over the place, but one that I very much enjoyed, is a book called Fiona and Jane by Jean Chen Ho, and this is read out loud on audiobook. How else are audiobooks read, Kendra? This is read by Natalie Naudus, who is a big favorite of mine as far as audiobook narrators go. And this is about Fiona and Jane. And it's really interesting because the style between the two women is different, like the writing style. So much the case that when a story, so this is, I guess I should back up and say this is a short story collection, and these different stories are featuring Fiona and Jane, sometimes together, sometimes separate in their lives, and it's just kind of a character portrait, different scenes from these characters' lives, how they intersect, and their friendship, and what happens with that. And so I found that their voices were very distinct in a lot of ways. And so even when there's one story where the viewpoint woman is not named, but I knew who it was just based on the style of the writing. And it was really great. I don't know, I didn't expect to fall in love with this book. And while I think structurally it has like some bumps in the road, as it were, I found learning about Fiona and Jane's different lived experiences just so fascinating, and I just fell in love with this book. It was one of the first books I read this year, and I haven't stopped thinking about it. I'm so excited for this author and what she has to write next. I really loved it. I don't know, there's so much going on in this book, and yeah, I was playing the new Pokemon game, the open world one. I'll put an image somewhere around here. Obviously, I love Nintendo. I was playing Pokemon and listening to this book, and I fell in love with the book, not necessarily the game, but you know, we'll just move on from there. So the next two books are Appalachian books that I finished this year, even though I started both in a different year last year, I guess. So one of them is Punch Me Up to the Gods by Brian Broom. This is also read by him on the audiobook, and Brian Broom is originally from Appalachian, Ohio. He eventually moves to Pittsburgh. This memoir is primarily focused on his growing up years and like early adulthood. He grows up as a gay black man in rural America, and he talks about the racism and the colorism that he experienced growing up and how that informed who he became and some of the trauma that he carried with him into adulthood. And he has such an incredible writing style, and the way that he's able to communicate things in this beautiful prose, but then discuss the inner workings of his mind, both with the understanding of what he felt at the time, but also able now to look back on his experience. I felt that he handled that really well, which I think can trip some memoirists up a bit. But I just love this book, and I cannot wait to read whatever he puts out next. So loved that. Another queer memoir is Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place by Nima Avashia. This is out from West Virginia University Press, which is the same press that put out The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. I really love Nima so much. I am very biased. I had her on for a live show for Read Appalachia, and she's just so wonderful. And she talks about growing up in southern West Virginia. She also talks about growing up queer and then coming out and moving away, and you know, the different aspects of coming out to people back home after you've left. And then also what it's like to see, you know, people she grew up with that were really important to her share horrible things on their Facebook about immigrants. And she's like, you do know I'm an immigrant. And they're like, oh, but not you. You're one of the good ones. Yeah, it's a lot. But I feel like she did such a great job. And I really loved how much love and, you know, attention to detail and... it's just such a beautiful book. I don't know. I have no words. I'm so grateful for her as a writer and as a person. I am biased, fair, but here we are. So one of my favorite books of the year is a book that I find very difficult to describe, and that is Easy Beauty by Chloe Cooper Jones. And you cannot see the lettering. I feel like they needed to make it a little bit bolder. I understand the elegant feel they were going for and how shiny and pretty it is, but anyway, this is a memoir by someone who has prose that makes me want to give up writing for the rest of my life. Like, why would I want to keep writing when this woman's prose exists? It's like, it's so good. So Chloe Cooper Jones is working on her second PhD when she finds herself at a bar listening to two other PhD candidates. They're arguing on whether or not she should exist. So one of the men is like, you know, people like Chloe shouldn't exist because they would have had genetic testing and made sure that people like her weren't born because the quality of life is not as good. And the other dude is like, oh my word, that's offensive. And Chloe's just sitting there like a deer in headlights, like, what is happening? Why does this keep happening? Why does this guy think he gets to say and whether or not I should exist? And I found it really interesting because, you know, with the pandemic, more and more people think eugenics is fine, and it's not fine. And I felt like this is such an important conversation to have. She begins kind of wandering around trying to figure out, you know, her place in the world. She was born with a condition that affects her stature, so she is shorter, and also affects her gait, so she walks with a visible limp. And a lot of people, you know, walking around seeing this woman who's visibly disabled, they have very horrific responses to her existence. And so this book is part her story, part her kind of contemplating her life and her place in it, and why she kept looking for something to say that yes, she deserves to live in this world. She's fine as she is. What is she looking for? Why does she feel so restless all of the time? Why does she keep leaving her husband and child to go travel the world? And then her husband just holds down the fort with their child, and she's knows that she is putting a lot on him, but she just needs to figure all of this out. And that's the thing, is like, I don't think she really ultimately comes with a concrete answer. She finds something that works for her. She finds something that gives her peace to a certain degree. But really, I felt the book was more of a thought experiment in beautiful prose. There's a lot of discussion about disabled motherhood. People told her she would not be able to have children when in fact she could. There was nothing wrong with her reproductive system. And so everyone was really shocked when she decided to carry her baby to term and have her daughter. And everyone kind of freaked out because, you know, heaven forbid, her baby also might have a disability. And it was just this whole conversation around disabled motherhood that is ongoing. So many disabled women are questioned on whether or not we would be good mothers or not. And we are interrogated, we are questioned, we have to prove constantly that we would be good mothers. And so if you are a disabled person going through a mother or parenting experience where you don't want to read about that right now, I would say wait on this book, because could be a lot of triggering content in here. But yeah, it's a beautiful book and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm just gonna quit gushing about that. So those are some of my favorite books of the year. This year has been really difficult to find books that have really spoken to me in a way that I really connected with. And so I was happy to find some things. Even though I read a lot more books than I normally have, I just had a lot of kind of okay books. And so I really am glad that these books exist, even if I'm not able to exactly articulate why I love these books and why hot mess people right now are what I'm gravitating towards. I mean, yeah, saying that out loud. Okay, it makes sense now, considering my existence. But I really appreciated characters who keep making these mistakes, who are writing about their process of discovering themselves and trying to figure out where they belong in the world, and does that place even exist? Where can they find acceptance and peace? And that is something that I found through a lot of these books. And I didn't realize that that was a theme until I stacked them all up to film this video, and here we are. So those are some of my favorite books, and mostly it's because I personally connected with them, I guess. So anyway, those are those books, and yeah, I guess I will talk to you in the next one, friends. Hang in there. As always, you can find me on social media at Katie Winchester. I also have a Substack where I write about disability, and those will be linked down in the description box. All right, bye, friends. I think, Lillian.